Okay. Hello and welcome to a very special edition GMP training, the new GMP Work From Home webinar series, coming to you live from my kitchen here in sunny Sydney, Australia. To the more than 300 of you that have registered to watch this training live across Australia and New Zealand, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning, to watch and to learn with us. And to those that might be watching the stream after this recording, we want to thank you as well. We hope that you find the content valuable. So this is our first session in the new Work From Home webinar series, and today we're going to be talking about a very timely and relevant subject, reach planning in display and video 360. So before we begin, like most of you, we are, as you can tell, working from home. So this is not our regular office. If we do experience any technical difficulties, well, we don't expect to hit any, but if we do run into any hiccups with the stream software, please just stick with us, stick around for a few minutes, we'll get things right back on track. So for those that I haven't met in person or exchanged emails with, my name is Rome. I'll be one of your presenters today. I'm the platform's account manager on the agency team here in Sydney. And joining me on today's call is my teammate and colleague, programmatic legend, Slav Mol. Slav, are you there? Perfect. Give us a little unmute just so we can check AV.
Can you hear me now? Oh, good.
Loud and clear. We are all set. AV is working. And yes, if you want to see our pictures, there we are. More importantly, we have a terrific agenda for you today, one that gets straight into the meat of our programmatic media planning tools and reach planning in DV360. You'll find it particularly valuable, particularly if you are a digital trader, digital planner, media strategist, or really if you're involved in any of the channel planning or campaign planning stages of the overall brand planning process. This is going to be a really useful session for you. So today we're going to cover an overview of the plan workspace in DV360, just an overview of capabilities. We'll then talk about reach planning and some recent important launches, specifically important launches that enable more accurate and more holistic planning capabilities. And then we'll do an overview of some important reach-based metrics before we go into a live demo, which will kind of bring all the concepts together. So within the metrics, we'll define some important digital metrics, important traditional media metrics, and population metrics that, again, will make more sense when I pass it over to Slav, who's going to run us through a demo of YouTube reach planning, as well as a YouTube Plus display-based plan. We'll then wrap up with some Q&A and just conversation style here at the end. Quick call out for those that are watching live. You should see a chat feature on the right-hand part of your screen. Chat is being monitored by one of our teammates. So if at any point in time you have any questions, feel free and drop any questions or comments in there. We'll do our best to get back in real time. And if there are some topics that are really kind of broadly applicable to everybody, we'll pull them up on screen at the end and do, again, kind of a conversation style Q&A. And lastly, just channeling my newfound YouTube celebrity, be sure and give this video a like and a subscribe to the Global GMP channel if you want to be notified for other helpful videos, case studies, and customer success stories. But with that, we'll start with a brief overview for those not as familiar with DV360 of the reach planning module. So reach planning actually sits within a broader workspace that we call the planning workspace. For those that are familiar with DV, the planning workspace actually lives under the inventory tab within the DV360 UI. And the planning workspace really has three core pillars of function that are most critical to planning effective digital media. Firstly, you have the ability to discover and negotiate new inventory deals. So this functionality provides media planners and buyers a discovery and negotiation experience where you can create media plans and basically identify inventory opportunities directly in DV360 with publishers that meet your campaign criteria. So based on things like usage, based on historical cost data, available impressions, availability and relevance of audiences, you can find publishers that match most relevant to your campaign criteria. And for larger media agencies, if you have an existing inventory strategy in place, you have a lot of existing deals, this is where you go to be able to look at that and manage that right within the marketplace and your My Inventory view within the planning workspace. Next, and where we'll be spending a lot of time today, is reach forecasting and reach planning. So this is where media planners can accurately forecast reach and using familiar brand metrics to provide you with insights about budget allocation decisions, and it's effectively to give you an idea of how many people you can reach for a given budget and criteria. So this is where it projects metrics like reach, viewability, and cost, and it allows you to tweak inputs to get a better idea of how your campaign will be effective in hitting your target criteria. And all of this lives within an interactive cost curve, which we'll show you in a moment, that adjusts to all those inputs that you put in. And finally, the last pillar of functionality within the planning module is that you have the ability to assemble and export comprehensive media plans. So this is where you can go to create and organize tactics and inventory and put any product executions separate from a buying method. So after you've gone through the process of RFPing your publishers, you've created your inventory strategy, and you've used reach planning to get a forecast of what the expected number of people is that you'd be able to hit. You're then able to bundle all of those inventory strategies together into a single plan, get a basic forecast of total impressions and reach across the entire campaign. And you can export that media plan as a CSV file to work with your programmatic team, your planning team, anybody else that needs to consider the projections and sign off on media plan. It's pretty awesome stuff. And really, as I said, the heart of it is the reach planning tool, where we're going to be spending a lot of time today. So this is what it looks like. Reach planning in Display and Video 360. It allows you to understand, again, how many people you can expect to hit or reach for a given budget, target, and flight dates. You can plan reach and expected performance of all of your programmatic campaigns across multiple inventory sources. So inventory that's available for reach planning is YouTube, which includes formats you might be familiar with like TrueView and bumpers, but it also includes formats like YouTube Reserve, and for those in Australia, it includes Google Preferred. Outside of just YouTube, reach planning in DV360 also allows you to pull reach forecasting for open auction video and open auction display, which I'll touch on in a moment. And again, with these tools, the whole idea is that you can verify if a campaign strategy is going to meet the marketing objectives and the reach objectives of your customer. You can explore in real time, and as you'll see in the UI demo that Slav's going to take us through, as you adjust inputs like audience, bid, and budget, you can see the forecasted impact on reach and how this impacts your overall plan. And really, if you think about it in terms of end-to-end process, where this really sits as a useful tool in your brand planning process, this sits after you've gone through the insights and discovery phase, and really once you've reached the point of either channel planning or campaign-based planning. So this really is a tool that exists for channel planners and for traders that are in that stage where they're replying to a brief or an RFP to inform what that strategy can look like. And just for where we're at right now, our reach planning tools are there to help you and your clients to get a better understanding of the opportunities that exist out there in digital display and digital video. And it's there as a useful tool to support you as you go through the process of calibrating, recalibrating any media plans, both now and into the future. So with that, there are also a few important product launches, feature updates to be aware of that kind of support the overall reach planning tool in DV360. And the first, as I mentioned before, is display forecasting. So this is a recent launch to general availability in the last couple of quarters. It's no longer just a video, YouTube, and open auction video reach planner. It now forecasts across display, and important to call out that this is compatible across not just Google authorized buyers, formerly known as AdX, but this also works across third-party exchanges as well. So this is the full suite of reach planning of all available open auction display inventory in market. So it's a really powerful tool, which really ladders up nicely to the next feature, which is deduplicated reach forecasting. This is a huge benefit to any planner that is historically used to working in planning tools that are channel specific or publisher specific, because it leverages Google's unique reach methodology to boil it down to a single number, a deduplicated reach number that forecasts the number of people, not cookies, that your campaign activity is forecast to hit. So that deduplicated reach forecast is probably the most significant feature improvement, significant general launch to be aware of. And you'll see kind of right in the UI when we go through the demo where that is and how it adjusts depending on the inventory that you're adding to your plan. Kind of as a subset of that deduplicated reach, we've also made some improvements in our on-target reach planning. And really this has to do with work that we've done updating our population sizes. So in Reach Planner, you have the ability to forecast reach across 3 different population sizes. We use census data, digital data, and YouTube population size. All of these data sources have been updated within the last quarter to reflect real-time data and basically what's happening in the latest ground truth. And so that demographic distributions, both for census, digital, and YouTube data, are lined up with live panels and other third-party data sources. And lastly, a really important call out to anybody that's not in the activations team, you're not a trader and you sit within planning and strategy, there is actually a new planning permission role in DV360 specifically for planners. So the reach plan, the reach planning user role allows you to go in and use the planning tools independent of any buying activity. It allows media planners to access the reach planning curve without impacting live or upcoming campaigns. And really, you think about it, this can enable some workflow efficiency benefits for you. No longer do you have to wait 24 or 48 hours, shoot off an email to your teammate and wait to get information back. You're empowered to actually jump in and use the reach planning tools without the risk of potentially impacting any activity. So those are kind of core launches to be aware of. And the other backend feature to be aware of, that just to preempt some questions that we might have around how reliable this data is. On the back end, it's important to call out that the reach planning tool in DV is leveraging near real-time data. So as with any reach forecasting tool, whether it's for television or other channels, it tends to be panel-based. And if you put garbage in terms of the data that you're using, you tend to get garbage out, particularly in times like we're experiencing right now in light of COVID, where you have really dynamic inventories and really rapidly changing consumer behavior. So it's important to note that the reach planning module in DV actually uses, for YouTube, a 92-day look back. So it's actually leveraging historical data for pulling reach assessments. And for display and video, it uses a 30-day look back to actually look at bid responses and inventory activity to give you a really accurate view of what that reach forecast looks like. So for example, let's say you're running a campaign, or you're planning a campaign rather, that's going to be a 2-week display buy. If you're planning it from today until 2 weeks into the future, it's actually going to use reach data from the past 14 days. So I know I said real time. It's not precisely real time, but it's very near real time in that it's using very recent data to inform and account for recent trends in user consumption and time on site. So important to be aware of that these are some of the features, and we'll demo these in a moment. And lastly, before we get into the demo, I wanted to get everybody aligned to some key metrics to be aware of. For folks coming from a digital background, a lot of these will look familiar. For those coming from a traditional background, maybe not as much, but important to be aware of what these mean, because these are the outputs that you get from actually going in and building a plan in the planning module. So digital metrics. Obviously, you have core metrics like frequency and CPM, frequency being just the average number of times or impressions that you can expect to serve a customer during the campaign, and CPM, just your cost per 1,000 impressions. And ultimately, this spits out a unique reach number, which is that deduplicated reach number I was mentioning. It boils it down to a person-based forecast, a deduplicated reach number. A subset of this is your on-target CPM and on-target reach. So this is important for anybody that's working either representing a brand, or maybe you are a brand that has a core buying demo and you're really only focused on a specific demographic. Say, for example, women 35 to 54, that's your on-target demographic. Your on-target CPM in the UI shows the cost per 1,000 impressions for that specific audience, and your on-target reach is the percentage of audience in that demographic that you are able to hit with, or that you are forecasted to hit with your campaign settings. So important definitions to be aware of. And as I mentioned before, also population metrics, which you have the ability to toggle between. So the broadest being census population, so total population size of country, digital population, which is a subset of the total country size, and then YouTube population, which is the total number of people in the signed in YouTube ecosystem in the last 28 days, which again will generally be a subset of digital. So census to digital to YouTube. Next important metrics to define here. For those of you coming from a digital background, maybe less familiar, you'll see some interesting metrics in here that will look very familiar to traditional media planners. So these are gross rating point, target rating point, and cost per point. Not sure how on target reach made it in there twice. But gross rating point. So if you're a television planner, this is kind of a second nature number. It's used very commonly to plan TV buys, and it's calculated as the percentage of the total market reached by your activity multiplied by the average frequency. So for instance, you run a campaign that reaches 10% of the total population at a frequency of 4, you would have a GRPs of 40, or in this case, the example, if you reach 30% of the total population at a frequency of 4, that's 120 gross rating points. Target rating point, you can think of this similar to our on-target reach metrics from the previous slide. This is in demo gross rating points, and it's calculated as on-target reach multiplied by average frequency. So for example, if you're an advertiser of a plan that reached 10% of your in-demo audience, let's say women 35 to 54 at a frequency of 1, that is 10 target rating points. And you use that number to back into a cost per point, which is just your cost per target rating point divided by cost per TRP. So I know those were text-heavy slides, and I'm sure you guys are eager to get into the actual live demos, which is where I'll pass it off to Slav. So we've set up 2 situations here that kind of represent some hypotheticals that you might commonly face as a media planner or a trader. The first, which we'll go into, is a YouTube reach plan example in DV360. So Slav, if you want to unmute, I'll pass it off to you, and then we can kind of jump into your screen so you can walk people through the UI.
Sounds good, Ron. And thanks for everyone watching and joining us today. It's important to understand, I think, exactly what the tool can do. Of course, it's not going to be, it's not as holistic as your actual targeting. So, and we'll go through some of the limitations and through some of the challenges, but it's the best starting point for any planner when you are also, before you know exactly what your brief is going to be, or when you want to play around with adding different audiences and seeing what your reach looks like, or subtracting audiences, or maybe changing your demographic targeting, etc. So the way we've designed the demo today is that we're going to go through this first example. It's a hypothetical example, but it's also based on briefs that we've seen come through. The settings that we are going to play around with today are a sample of everything that exists. So in your own time, if you are curious, or if you just want to get more familiar with the tool, we strongly recommend that you add on different settings, or you subtract different settings to kind of make the tool your own and fit with your own campaign parameters that you're actually testing for. In this first example, we are taking a men's personal hygiene brand. So imagine someone like, say, Gillette or the likes of. So the brief that we've received, the goal is to promote awareness. So we'll be focusing on branding for this exercise, and the KPIs that we'll be looking to achieve would be based around CPV and CPM accordingly. The first example we're going to walk through would be YouTube specific, and as Ron mentioned, we're going to then look at how adding display into the overall campaign actually changes our forecast. Of course, since we are based in Australia, so we're going to take Australia as a location. We're also going to work with only 30 days of forecasting. The reason why is also going back to what Ron mentioned before. For YouTube, you're more than welcome to expand your proposed campaign dates to beyond 30 days, up to 92. However, for open auction, whether it be display or video, we recommend that you stick to 30 days, because otherwise the system doesn't have enough data to actually put forward a unique reach forecast for you. Since we're talking about a men's personal hygiene brand, we're going to be targeting males. We don't really at this time we are not really going to bother about age brackets, because we just say, hey, this brand perhaps is a sponsor of the upcoming Olympics, and so they'll be looking at anyone and everyone who's potentially looking at sports, who is looking into kind of self-grooming and so self-care, perhaps interested in health and fitness as a different attribute. And these would be all these will be parameters that you would already know. Of course, being a planner or a trader, you would have run previous campaigns, or you would just know a lot about the affinity of your brand with a specific audience segment. So feel free, again, in your own time, to add and subtract as you will. These are going to be the targeting. These are going to be the target segments that we work with today. In terms of what creative formats we're going to use, we've chosen two of the more commonly used ones. So a 6-second bumper ad and a 30-second review in stream. And so, Ron, if you could flick to, there we go. I hope everyone can see my screen. So this should be familiar for all of you guys in working in DV360. For all of the planners who may have not been exposed to the UI before, I think that this would be really helpful, because one of the things that we're really proud of, that Ron also mentioned, is that there is a planner user role, and it's specific to simply being able to create and play around with the planning tool. You won't be able to activate anything. There is no cost data associated with it that you can actually act on. So it's a completely safe space for you to play around with at this time. The way to actually so if you're DV360 administrator and you would like to provide someone those planner user rights, the way you do that is the same way as you would create any sort of permissions for anything else. But I just want to show you really quickly. So this is our UI. We're currently under advertiser, currently under inventory tab, but it doesn't really matter, because in whichever view you're in, you will see this little person icon at the top. When you click on it, you would see user management. And when you click in it, you would be able to actually see this green button here that it says new user. When you click on new user, your view would look like this. So you just enter the name of the person you want to grant permissions to, their email, and then you would need to select the relevant partner or advertiser that you want those permissions to be valid for. Once you add those in, you see the role, the little role icon here, and here it says read and write. So when you click in it, when you select the specific partner that you're trying to grant permissions for, you click on action, and then you can actually change the role to whatever else strikes your fancy. In this case, planner or planner limited. There is a very good Help Center article that explains the differences between the different roles. So we can look to share that post the live stream. Or you could also just go to support.google.com and look for planner user role in DV360, and the Help Center will come up. So I hope this is clear. One other thing I wanted to mention before we dive into the demo is, for those of you who have taken a stab at using the Reach Planner before, you might be surprised that it has actually moved. Before, it used to be there used to be a big green button here next to your campaign view that said create new campaign, plan your campaign, and then basically this is where it used to live. So don't be surprised. It still exists, but it has moved houses, if you will. So currently, where you find the planning tool is actually under your inventory tab on the left-hand side, and then you'll see this tab called plans. So it's there to stay. So don't worry. We're not really in the habit of moving things around too much. So for the time being, this is where you can find it. Okay. So how do you start actually creating a plan? So, whoops, I seem to have lost my cursor. So the green button on the top that says new plan. And again, all of you planners, really don't worry. This is completely safe playing space. We give the campaign a test name or whatever else is relevant for your specific plan. Choose a goal. So in this case, we're working with a hypothetical brief of raising awareness. The KPI that we want to pick is CPV, because currently we're working with video. Later on, we'll add display. So that's why I'm ticking both boxes. But at this time, for either CPV, or you could also pick CPM, because we know that we'll be using this later. But for the time being, say that you're not actually considering display yet, we put a goal of, say, 10 cents for completed view. The planned spend that you put in here is going to be the media cost that you're actually planning to use. And I cannot stress this enough. It's important because when we talk about media cost, the way the tool looks at it is basically it uses media cost as the number that you're going to spend simply on buying media. No edit fees, nothing else. The fees that are under your advertiser are actually taken into consideration as well. And I'll show you where those show up in a few seconds. But say for our hypothetical example, we're using $15,000 here. Don't be alarmed when you see USD on my screen. This is related to your advertiser settings. So when you actually create a plan under your specific advertiser, this currency would reflect the settings under that advertiser. Most of the time it would be AUD. For those of you joining from New Zealand, it would be New Zealand dollar. So our planned dates here, we are going to start today. And we are going to, again, make sure that it's less than 30 days in order to get that display reach number as well. And then we hit create. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of a step-by-step process that shouldn't be too scary or too unfamiliar. Alrighty, so we get to the place where we are actually going to start making changes, and we're going to start inputting the audience segments and the parameters that are going to govern our prediction. The first thing I want to kind of draw your attention to is this the settings here at the top. So those are the settings. Think of them as overarching campaign settings. So no matter how many line items you add, no matter how many different formats you add, here you can actually input all the settings that you know are going to be common across your plan. So if you want to edit those, you click on the little pencil button at the top of your screen, and then you'll be able to actually adjust those as you will. The 15,000 is already taken from our previous settings as well as the dates, but there are a couple of other things that are of interest to us. The first one would be geography. So as we see, again, this is a test advertiser, hence there are a lot of things going on, but it's not uncommon to see different geo-targeting than the one that you actually want to engage with. So here, it's the same as just creating a campaign. You hit on the edit button. We are going to remove the geography that is of no interest to us, and then add the one that is Australia. In this case, we can hit done, and then we click on apply. You can also, one thing I wanted to mention, you can also go deeper more granular into your geo-targeting. That could include major cities, etc. I think my recommendation about going around your planning in general would be maybe start in the middle. Don't start too granular and don't start too broad, because that might skew your forecast. If you start in the middle, I think then you have a benchmark. Do you need to go broader? Can you go broader, or can you go more granular? Because as Ron mentioned, the tool uses historical data, and that's overlaid with also deterministic and inferred and panel-based data for unique reach. And so when we go to granular, the tool may not have enough to actually be confident in its own ability to predict. So for example, if you start too granular with all of your settings, you might not actually get any predictions. So just, I guess, be conscious of that. So we fixed the geography here. The demographic is something that I'm going to set here as well, because based on our previous brief, I know that we're going to be targeting males. For the age bracket, I'm not really fussed about it necessarily, because again, I'm looking for anyone and everyone across all ages. For your specific brief, when you play around with the tool, of course, there might be certain demographics that you are more interested in than others. So you can just go ahead and kind of curate those based on your campaign parameters. for example, if you're a cosmetics brand, you might have specific bursts based on specific age demographics. So maybe young women versus more mature women, et cetera, et cetera. So completely up to you. At this time for the demo, I'm just going to let it remain targeting all ages. Parental status, again, I'm not really interested in whether someone is a parent or not. This is not necessarily part of the brief that I'm currently working with. However, at a later point, maybe you're a toy maker that has a new collection, and then the parental status would be something of interest to you. So you can go ahead and just select or deselect that. So for the time being, I'm just going to hit apply. And again, I'm currently creating settings that are going to be common across all of my different formats that I'll be adding on to later on. Brand safety is something you can also actually input here. I would suggest that you do, because it's going to help the system create a more accurate forecast. So again, you can, if you're using other verification services like IIS, for example, or Double Verify, you could also select those, and they would reflect the cost that is associated with your partner and advertiser. And those will be calculated later on in terms of what those fees would look like based on the media cost. At this point, we're not going to use any, so I'm just going to hit apply. Again, there are a lot more settings. I'm not going to go through necessarily all of them, but please, please, please explore as you will when you actually create your own plans. Okay, so as you see, the changes that we did are now reflected here. So if you like, you could do a quick cross-check. Otherwise, we just proceed on to adding the plan and the different formats that we're interested in. So the space that we're going to work in today is here in the display and video one, but there is also the publisher and deals and the audio one, where you could actually add and discover deals, as well as use your audio, some of your audio deals or audio campaigns to forecast on. One word of caution is audio does not currently have the capability of including unique reach. So stay tuned, I guess. If that changes, talk to your account manager. They would have the most up-to-date information. But at this point, audio is still a bit of a fledgling addition, if you will, to our planning space. The publisher and deals, you can definitely go ahead and explore that space. My recommendation would be to use it, especially if you're looking to discover deals and then use those for your actual campaign targeting later on. The deals that you create here through the discovery module would then live under my inventory tab. So you'd be able to see those that you create here, then kind of port over to your overall deals view. However, this to me is the space where most of the planning would actually work in at the moment. Again, deals is something that is quite relevant, but also by nature, when they're first created, the tool doesn't have any idea about volumes, about performance, about just the number of avails that are coming from the publisher and what those would look like. So chances are that the view you're currently able to get here from your deal, unless it's an always-on deal that is, for example, run of network, where you could actually get that volume, it might skew your forecast. You definitely play around with it, but today we're just going to focus on the open auction part as the one that has the highest relevance. So we're going to click on Add. When it comes to adding display and video formats, and here is where we now start to make a selection. When we click on Select a format, it gives us an option. Do we want to use YouTube, or do we want to use open auction, meaning display or video? So for the first part of our brief, we're going to use YouTube. Wanted to show you guys that you're actually able to also forecast against your reserved YouTube buys. So if you have a Google preferred deal, excuse me, you're able to also add on any sort of forecasting here. For the time being, we're going to focus on more on the open auction part. So I'm going to add on a bumper ad. Again, the quick check that my dates look good. With the $15,000 that I put as my original budget for YouTube, I'm just going to say I'm going to spend maybe $9,000 on bumpers because I'm really trying hard to build that awareness. So with those initial settings, you just click done, and then you start to see the reach curve populate. And there are a couple of things that I want to point to in this case. So the reach here is your on-target reach. So what this is showing us is based on the parameters that you've set, what is the percentage of what is the on-target percentage that we can reach with the budget that we have. And here, if you're interested, you can explore how that number changes based on just changing the media cost. One other thing I want to show you is that number, also this on-target reach number, would also change based on the population denominator that we use. So Rowan mentioned 3, and you can see all 3 of them here. The first one is the census data that we use, so that is going to be the more restrictive one. When it comes to YouTube and YouTube planning, I definitely recommend using the YouTube population denominator. So you could simply change this here, and you'll see the numbers increase slightly. And that is because we're actually talking about real YouTube data, real YouTube people here. If you if you add on other formats that fall outside of YouTube, you could also use the digital denominator. And you see it's also a little bit higher than your census one because this takes a look at the actual digital population that we've seen pass through in the past 30 days. So whichever denominator you like to use, you can change it at any time. Currently, because I'm working in the YouTube space, I'm going to keep the YouTube one on. Okay, so we've set some targeting, but how about if we want to add additional ones? Good question. So we actually select the line that we've created here, and we'll see a panel on the right-hand side that allows us to add on additional parameters. You can double check that the parameters that you set before are here and they're respected. So the cost, metric, etc. This is one thing I wanted to draw your attention to. A lot of advertisers are a little bit wary of using video partners. If that is the case for you and you want to be more restrictive, you can just select YouTube only. So this would exclude our display video partners from the forecast. Then let's say this is the age brackets that we're working with. We make sure that it's male that we're targeting. But how about we want to actually restrict this a little bit because we are actually looking for people interested in sports based on our men's personal hygiene profile, audience profile. So you see the add audience list button here. So we actually click this on. One thing I want to make sure is clear is that when it comes to TrueView, we can only use Google audiences, and those Google audiences are in-market and affinity for forecasting. We can also exclude those, but for TrueView specifically, we cannot at this time exclude first-party data. We can exclude first-party data when we work with open auction forecasting. So your open auction display or your open auction video forecasting, for example. So we click on add. We select, say, health and fitness buffs, and then we click on sports fans. Whoops. Clearly spelling is not my forte today. Sports fans. So this is the way you can select any relevant any relevant targeting. One thing I want to show you guys is I'm also interested in maybe folks that are into skincare. So I'm going to select that. You see that some of the segments are too small to actually spit out a prognosis. So we are going. Please make sure that you actually read the callouts. We're going to hit apply. and once again, and then we're going to see how our forecast changes here. So this is how you add on any sort of data, any sort of targeting that you like. You can play around with content, technology, so if you're looking for a specific device, etc. So it's very easy to kind of see how the changes work. Once we're happy with our settings, we're going to hit apply and see how this changes. We're going to expect it to shrink, most likely. And I have a delivery on to my door. It's kind of funny. Okay, so once we're here, we want to add on a different format. As we said, we also want to use an in-stream. We're going to have an in-stream creative. So here we use 9,000, so I have 6,000 left of my 15,000. So I'm just going to hit done. And then you will see how your forecast changes based on how many items you add on. And this is great in terms of finding that sweet spot for where does my reach level off versus where is it actually adding incremental value to me. So see how this jumped. However, one thing that we haven't done for the TrueView for the 30 seconds video yet is add in the audience that we did for our bumper ad. So you can play around with adding different audiences. For the purpose of this this exercise, I'm going to use the same ones. So bear with me while I update this to the same targeting as we did before. And again, feel free to experiment with any and every targeting that you see is relevant here to you. In this case, we're keeping it pretty broad. Alrighty, hit apply, and we are good to go with our TrueView section, which is really cool. So one other thing I wanted to show you guys is as you add on these line items, there's very interesting information that populates here at the bottom. So what the system is doing is actually giving you an average cost, a recommendation for, hey, based on what we've seen, based on your targeting and based on your settings, this is kind of where we see, this is the suggested media cost price you could use, going as high up as basically the bottom one. So from 0.01 to 0.06, which in this case falls exactly within the parameters that we set before. It gives you a sense of impressions. It gives you a sense of views as well, the unique reach numbers, frequency. So take a look, play around, see how those change. One other thing that I wanted to show you is as you add on these items, there is a cost curve tab over here. When you change it, you could actually see what the forecast is based on, say, okay, this audience that I've selected in terms of age bracket, what is the distribution? And then you can actually plan different bursts around maybe specific segments. So a big segment here is 25 to 35 or 34. So maybe you could next amend your plan and use that bracketing specifically. You could also, if you're interested in where would those impressions serve, then take a look at the device breakdown and say, okay, this is very mobile skewed, which makes sense because it's YouTube. So maybe it makes sense to have creatives that are mobile optimized. So feel free, poke around, play around, see how the numbers change. And then your on-target reach would be here. So how many actual people would you reach? So it's 1.25 in this case. This is not total impressions. This is your actual reach number, unique deduplicated reach number. And then you have some forecasts on other metrics such as CPM. Ron, could you switch to the second example, please?
Yeah, and just conscious of time as well. I think we'll try and get through this display example second.
So when it comes to display, the targeting is pretty much the same. Everything works the same in terms of the way we think about adding any other formats. The only difference is we actually select display, and then we'll put $5,000.
I was not showing your screen. Do you mind repeating what you just did? I went back to the campaign brief so people can see that we're building an extension of the hypothetical men's hygiene campaign and trying to add display as an additional tactic. But yeah, if you can.
Yeah. So you have my screen visible now? Okay, so the way we actually added the display button is the same way as we added the previous ones. So we just click on add, we selected display here under open auction, and then we put 5,000 in terms of media cost. And then you get this additional line item here. And then you see how your reach numbers also change based on what you've added in. Again, for display, your one thing I want to point out that is a little bit different. So when we talk about audience targeting, you would be able to see that here you can actually include and exclude first and third party audience data in addition to your Google audiences, which was a little bit different from your TrueView one. And then one other thing that is interesting is that you can also play around with creative dimensions. So maybe you're only interested in these three because you know that these are the sizes that we'll be creating. And then you see how that forecast also changes. So feel free to experiment, feel free to play around however you like. Once you are satisfied with what you have, you just click on Save to Plan and close. And your plan is going to populate here. The one thing I want to point to is that you see that this is not this is a little bit higher than the $20,000 we've currently put. So 15,000 plus 5,000 for display. If you click on the little icon here, you would see that your media cost is exactly what you've put, and then you have an estimate of fees in addition to that. So these fees are those that you have already put under your advertisers. So things like tech fee and anything else. So you can use this as a percentage to plan your for your plans going forward. If you like to just have a certain percentage of your overall budget set aside for fees. So that's kind of it, guys. It's not, it's pretty easy to use. It's very informative because you can see the different distribution. You see the suggested CPMs or CPV rates. You would be able to see the estimated cost per line here as well in terms of additional fees. It's a really powerful story you can tell by kind of creating a very well-informed forecast prior to implementation. You would ensure that your campaign is actually running smoothly. And you can always amend that back as well as you will. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and we'll try to address them in the next few minutes. But that's kind of it. I'm done.
Great. Go back here. And just end with a few key takeaways. So thank you very much, Slav, for the live demos across a YouTube reach curve example and then a YouTube Plus display reach curve example. Some key takeaways and recommendations for you from today's session. So obviously, key takeaway number one is to be able to access the reach planning tool via the planner user role in DV360. So if you're already a trader, it's going to be very simple, just navigate there. But if you are in the planning team or strategy, you can work with your programmatic team, work with your DV360 account owner to, as Slav said, add that permission level, whether it's a planner with full access or a planner with limited access. The difference between the two is that some cost data is not visible to the limited planner role, and we can share more details after the training. The second key takeaway is to use reach planning and unique reach to plan your holistic digital branding campaigns. Again, we're going through very interesting times here, and this tool is here as a support tool to be able to help you as you go through calibrating, recalibrating, pivoting plans and adjusting. And really it's there to try and give you an updated real-time view of opportunities that are available across display and video channels. And thirdly, work with your DV360 media team in order to use the reach planner to its fullest. So if you're dialing in from an agency or a client, you likely know who your GMP rep is. By all means, feel free and reach out, share this video as a point of reference if you have any questions, and begin to work more closely with them. They're really the experts that can help you build out reach scenarios, build out plans, and kind of integrate this as part of a core tool of your planning functionality. So with that, we'll open it up to QA. I've been kind of loosely monitoring questions as they've been coming through, and our programmatic team has been responding on the chat. I'm just going to, I guess, start pulling a few questions up here. And Slav, you and I can kind of speak to them. So recent question here, does open auction forecast work with third-party exchange inventory? And the answer is yes, it does work.
Definitely.
Exactly. It's not just limited to authorized buyers, formerly known as ADEX. It works across third-party exchange as well.
Yep. That goes both for video and display, open auction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question, where can we see an overall unique reach for this campaign, YouTube and display together? That is directly in the demo that Slav gave. You'll actually get a deduplicated reach number. It's the first number you'll see just below your cost curve. That is the deduplicated user level unique reach for the campaign.
Yep.
We have a question, can you push a plan straight to activation? Not at this time. So it's a great piece of functionality and a common request for product that we hear. It doesn't exist currently, but it is, yes, can't really speak too much to roadmap or betas, but obviously just to mention that it's a common piece of feedback, and so something that we are likely looking to build out great functionality around.
And we hear you.
Yes, and we hear you. Question, where can we see GRP or TARPs if we want to have comparable metrics with television? This is a great question. And again, if we were to defer back to the UI, just below that cost curve, you'll see the main metrics that kind of go deduplicated reach number, I believe it's percentage reach, and then beyond that are your traditional metrics. So you see GRP, TRP, and cost per point. And the important call out there is that those numbers, along with all of the other numbers in the reach planning tool, those update depending on which population you've selected as your denominator. So as Slav kind of demoed, important to call out if you're planning television, probably the closest comparable, the denominator in television is going to be a panel based. So the closest comparable will be either census data or digital population when you're wanting to get as close to an apples to apples comparison for your GRPs and TRPs.
Yeah, and also one more thing when it comes to the planning. So we didn't really have time, but once you save and once you get the plan up and ready to go, you can actually, by selecting each line item or selecting all, you could download the plan to a CSV format and you will see all of your metrics actually reflected there. So you can then go ahead and maybe make amends to the plan and then download it again. And then you can compare any metric, be it a GRP or anything else that's relevant to you, and then compare that with your, say, traditional TV metrics as well.
Yeah, that's a great call out and a great piece of functionality there. Doesn't go that extra step to the previous question. It doesn't push to activation, but it does download into a nice CSV file for planning purposes. Yep. Next question we have, what is the difference between Google Preferred and video ads under the options for YouTube? So Google Preferred, for those that might be dialing in from New Zealand, it is an offering a subset of YouTube inventory. And essentially video ads, I believe, is just combined non-curated video content for YouTube. One thing to call out is both Slav and I are members of our platforms team and don't actually represent YouTube as a publisher from the perspective of kind of what we work on within the GMP world. YouTube is just a publisher that is accessible through Display and Video 360. If you have specific questions about YouTube, please reach out to your Google Media team. They would be a lot closer to help kind of navigate what the difference and nuance is there. But yeah, GP is just a subset of curated top content, essentially, of YouTube.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's exactly what Ron mentioned. But I think in terms of the way you approach your planning, the GP part would be only that curated top portion of all the YouTube inventory. So when you select non-GP formats, that means across everything that YouTube has to offer. When you select the GP format, that is going to be very restricted to that top 100 channels at a given time.
Yeah, I don't actually know what the specific number of channels or the curation process. Again, it's a good question to reach out to your Google Media rep on, but it's generally the top most premium inventory that has high engagement and reach. Great question we have here. Are we able to get reach for catch-up TV and BVOD? So yes, you are able to get reach forecasts for catch-up TV and BVOD as long as the inventory is being made available through open auction. So anything here in the reach planning module is going to be open auction based forecasting. So for publisher, catch-up television, broadcaster, video on demand, for anyone who doesn't know those acronyms, so long as that inventory is being passed through on an open auction exchange or an open auction bid, yes, we will see that and we will forecast against it. And just to take that question an additional step further, a common question we also get is, can we forecast for connected television? Obviously a very a premium device within the living room. Can we forecast against CTV? Yes, with nuance, only if the publisher is passing back connected television inventory, both with a identifier that we can use for frequency management and passing it back to open exchange. I think in this region of the world, in this market in Australia and New Zealand, that inventory tends to be negotiated on more direct deal basis, so on a guaranteed basis or a preferred deal basis, in which case we wouldn't see or be able to forecast against that. So your best bet for those CTV deals is to work directly with your publisher or your exchange partner. And just know that it's a piece of feedback that we have and that that we are very aware of moving forward. Great question here. Is it possible to access the plan created by one user by the other user? So does the plan live on?
The plan lives on.
Yeah, it's gonna say, the plan lives on here.
The plan lives on, but if you have access to that advertiser, you'll be able to see, so if your permissions are the same as another person's, when one person creates a plan that would live in that view, so you'd be able to access those plans as well. If your permissions are different, then you wouldn't be able to, but the plans are saved. So once you hit save and apply, the way we did in the demo, those plans all live under, they're saved under your plans tab, under your inventory. So anyone can access that if they have access to the advertiser.
Yeah, the plan does live on.
Question
here from Annie: why can't you pull these reports for more than 30 days? Sorry, I missed half the conversation on this. That's okay, Annie. So yes, the stipulation there is that for reach-based planning, YouTube, because it's a logged-in user space, has a look-back window of up to 92 days. And for open auction exchange-based buys, because we don't have the same kinds of direct login capability across all of that other inventory and market, that's why we have a shortened look-back window to make sure that the forecasting data that we're basing those open exchange, display, and video forecast against is most current and most fresh. So that's kind of the reason for the lag there, the difference there.
Yeah.
Another question: can we duplicate a plan and then change some pieces?
Yeah. I wish. So at this time, you can only delete a plan from once it's saved. You can definitely make amends to it as you're working through it, and you can duplicate as we were adding on different lines. So the bumper ads, and then the true viewing stream, and then the display. You can duplicate those if you like, and you can make changes there. But once the plan is actually saved, you have to start by creating a new one, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately, just a minor limitation at this point. I don't see any additional questions coming in through, and I am conscious of time. We're at 11 here, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll begin wrapping up here. Just wanted to quickly ask all of you that are dialed in live, if you could do us a massive, massive favor and just take 60 seconds of your time to fill in our feedback survey, which is in the live chat link now. And we'll also be sending out a recap email with links to other relevant resources and a link to this video so you can share it and watch it after. But yeah, I think that's it from us. Slav, anything else to add?
No, other than I know that this is a little bit brief and a little bit maybe not entirely relevant in terms of the specifics of the brief. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Reach out to your account manager. We're more than happy to take this as on a case-by-case basis as well, if you have any specific questions.
Exactly. So with that, thank you so much for taking the time to join, and please continue to work with your GMP team if you have any follow-up questions.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.